The Vampire Society unveiled. In the bustling metropolis of New Aurora, where neon lights pierced the perpetual darkness and skyscrapers stretched towards an eternally clouded sky, humans went about their lives blissfully unaware of the ancient society that thrived in their midst. For centuries, vampires had woven themselves into the very fabric of human civilization, hidden in plain sight. Amara Nightshade, elder of the Crimson Fang clan, stood atop the city's tallest building, her keen eyes scanning the urban landscape below. At over 700 years old, she had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of new technologies, and the ever-changing face of human society. Yet through it all, her kind had remained a constant, secret presence. Another night, another hunt, she murmured to herself, her voice carried away by the wind that whipped around her. With inhuman grace, she leaped from the building, her form blurring as she descended rapidly towards the streets below. In a dark alley, Amara landed silently, her long black coat settling around her. She straightened, smoothing her platinum blonde hair, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. To any passerby, she appeared to be nothing more than a striking woman in her late 20s, her pale skin and sharp features drawing admiring glances. As she walked, Amara reflected on the delicate balance her kind maintained. The Vampire High Council, of which she was a member, had strict rules about interaction with humans. Feeding was carefully regulated, with most vampires subsisting on blood banks and willing donors. Those who hunted were bound by a code of ethics: never kill, never turn without permission, and always erase the memory of the encounter. Amara's destination was the Crimson Fang's headquarters, disguised as an exclusive nightclub called Eternal Night. As she approached, the deep bass of electronic music thrummed through the air. A line of eager humans waited outside, hoping to gain entry to what they believed was the hottest spot in town. The bouncer, a burly vampire named Victor, nodded respectfully as Amara bypassed the line and entered the club. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Humans danced and drank, unaware that they moved among predators. Vampires mingled seamlessly, their enhanced senses allowing them to communicate over the deafening music. Amara made her way to a hidden door, pressing her palm against a scanner. The door slid open, revealing a sleek elevator. As she descended to the underground levels, the pounding music faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. The elevator doors opened to reveal a vast chamber, its high ceilings supported by Gothic arches. This was the true heart of the Crimson Fang clan, where vampires could drop their human facades and be themselves. "Elder Nightshade," a voice called out. Amara turned to see Lysander, her second-in-command, approaching. The young vampire, a mere 200 years old, looked troubled, his usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "What is it, Lysander?" Amara asked, her tone sharp. She had not survived 7 centuries by ignoring the instincts that now prickled at the back of her neck. Lysander hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "There's been another incident. A rogue vampire attacked a human in broad daylight. Witnesses saw everything." Amara hissed, her fangs extending involuntarily. "Who was it?" "Marcus, the fledgling from last year's turning." Cursing under her breath, Amara strode towards the council chambers. This was the 3rd incident this month, and the High Council would not be pleased. As she walked, other vampires parted before her, sensing her fury. The council chambers were a circular room, dominated by a round table carved from a single piece of ancient oak. 5 ornate chairs surrounded it, one for each elder of the major vampire clans. As Amara took her seat, the other elders materialized from the shadows. There was Octavian, the eldest among them, his face a road map of wrinkles that belied his incredible strength. Beside him sat Lilith, her fiery red hair a stark contrast to her pale skin. Across from them were the twins, Castor and Pollux, their identical faces set in grim expressions. "You've all heard, I assume," Amara said without preamble. Octavian nodded slowly. "This cannot continue, Amara. Your clan's fledglings are becoming a liability. I am aware, Amara replied, her voice cold. Marcus will be dealt with. Lilith leaned forward, her green eyes flashing. Dealt with. Like the others, a slap on the wrist and a stern talking to. No, this ends now. The human world is becoming too observant, too connected. We cannot risk exposure. The twins spoke in unison, their voices a creepy harmony. We vote for execution. Marcus must be made an example of. Amara felt a pang of regret. Marcus was young, impulsive, but he had potential. Yet she knew the others were right. The safety of their entire society was at stake. Very well, she said softly. I will see it done. As the council dispersed, Amara remained seated, lost in thought. The world was changing faster than ever before, and she feared that their ancient ways might not be enough to keep them hidden for much longer. Little did she know that far above, beyond the clouded skies of New Aurora, events were unfolding that would shatter the delicate balance the vampires had maintained for millennia. In the inky blackness of space, a massive ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Its surface was a strange, shifting metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In the ship's control room, a being that could only be described as alien surveyed the blue-green planet below. The alien commander, known as Zarthak, had led his people across countless light years in search of a new home. Their own world had been dying, its resources depleted by centuries of war and unchecked expansion. Now, after a journey that had lasted generations, they had found a suitable planet. There was just one problem. It was already inhabited. Zarthak's multifaceted eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the information streaming in from the ship's sensors. The dominant species appeared to be primitive, barely into their space age. Conquering them would be simple. But there was something else, an anomaly in the readings. Scattered across the planet were beings that registered as alive, yet gave off no heat signature. Intrigued, Zarthak ordered further scans. As the alien ship hung in orbit, undetected by Earth's primitive tracking systems, both humans and vampires went about their lives, unaware that their world stood on the brink of a cosmic collision that would forever alter the fate of both species. In the depths of the Crimson Fang's lair, Amara felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. She looked up, her ancient instincts screaming a warning she couldn't yet understand. Something was coming, something that would change everything. The stage was set. Humanity, oblivious to both the vampires in their midst and the aliens above, continued their daily lives. The vampires, hidden for centuries, prepared to eliminate a threat to their secrecy, and orbiting silently above, an alien race prepared to make first contact in the most violent way possible. The night sky over New Aurora, usually obscured by light pollution and smog, seemed darker than usual, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when three vastly different societies would collide. In her penthouse apartment, Amara Nightshade stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her enhanced vision picking out details in the city below that no human could see. For the first time in centuries, she felt an emotion she had almost forgotten. Fear. What's coming? She whispered to the night. And are we ready for it? The city had no answer for her, but soon, very soon, the silence would be shattered, and the world as they knew it would change forever. First contact and chaos. The night New Aurora changed forever started like any other. The city hummed with its usual nocturnal energy, a symphony of human life oblivious to the ancient predators walking among them or the cosmic threat looming above. Amara Nightshade stood in the execution chamber, her face an impassive mask as she watched Marcus, the wayward fledgling, struggle against his bonds. The young vampire's eyes were wide with fear and betrayal. "Please, Elder," Marcus begged, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean to expose us. I was just so hungry." Amara raised her hand, silencing him. "The law is clear, Marcus. The safety of our kind must come first." She stepped forward, fangs extending, prepared to deliver the final blow. Suddenly, a tremor shook the underground chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling as the vibrations intensified. Amara froze, her enhanced senses on high alert. "What's happening?" Marcus cried out. Before Amara could respond, Lysander burst into the room, his usually composed demeanor shattered. "Elder, you need to see this." Abandoning the execution, Amara followed Lysander to the surface. As they emerged from the hidden entrance of the Eternal Nightclub, the scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. The sky was alive with light. Massive ships, unlike anything Earth had ever seen, hung in the air above New Aurora. Beams of energy lanced down from the vessels, carving swaths of destruction through the city. The air was filled with the screams of panicked humans and the wail of emergency sirens. "By all the Ancient Ones," Amara breathed, her immortal heart racing. "What are they?" As if in answer, a booming voice echoed across the city, emanating from the alien ships. The language was unlike anything Amara had heard in her centuries of existence, but somehow she understood every word. "People of Earth," the voice intoned, "we are the Zarkan. Your planet is now under our control. Resist, and you will be eradicated." Amara's mind raced. In all her years, through wars and plagues and the rise of technology, nothing had prepared her for this. The careful balance they had maintained, the secrecy of vampire society, all of it was now at risk. As she watched, a group of humans ran past, fleeing from a beam of energy that was systematically destroying buildings. Without thinking, Amara blurred into action, her vampire speed allowing her to snatch several humans out of harm's way just as the beam struck where they had been standing. The humans looked up at her in shock, noticing her inhuman speed and strength. Amara realized her mistake too late. In saving them, she had exposed herself. What are you?" one of the humans stammered. Before Amara could respond, a new threat emerged. From the alien ships, smaller craft began to descend. As they touched down on the streets of New Aurora, strange, armored figures emerged. The aliens were tall, with multiple limbs and bodies that seemed to shimmer and shift, making it hard to focus on them. Lysander appeared at Amara's side, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Elder, what do we do?" Amara watched as the alien soldiers began to round up humans, herding them towards their ships. Her centuries of experience told her that remaining hidden was no longer an option. The world had changed irrevocably in the span of a few minutes. "We fight," Amara declared, her voice carrying to the other vampires who had emerged from hiding. "This is our world too, and we will not let it fall to these invaders." As if to punctuate her words, an alien soldier approached their group, weapon raised. Without hesitation, Amara blurred forward, her vampire strength allowing her to tear through the alien's armor as if it were paper. The creature let out an inhuman shriek before falling silent. The humans watched in a mix of awe and terror as Amara stood over the fallen alien, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She turned to address them, knowing that centuries of secrecy were coming to an end. "I am Amara Nightshade, elder of the Crimson Fang clan," she announced. "We are vampires, and we have lived among you in secret for millennia. But now we stand with humanity against this threat." The revelation hung in the air for a moment, competing with the chaos of the invasion for sheer shock value. Then, surprisingly, one of the humans stepped forward. "I don't care if you're vampires, aliens, or the Tooth Fairy," he said, his voice shaky but determined. "If you can fight these things, we need your help." Amara nodded, a grim smile on her face. She turned to Lysander. "Contact the other clans. Tell them the masquerade is over. It's time for vampires to step out of the shadows." As Lysander sped off to carry out her orders, Amara addressed the growing crowd of humans and vampires. "We need to organize. The aliens may have technology, but we have the home advantage. Vampires, use your strengths, your speed, your strength, your immortality. Humans, you know this city better than anyone. Guide us, tell us where to strike." As she spoke, more aliens approached, their weapons humming with strange energy. Amara tensed, ready for battle, when suddenly a new voice cut through the chaos. "Don't forget about us, bloodsucker." Amara turned to see a group of humans emerging from a nearby building. But these were no ordinary humans. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire, and they moved with a fluid grace that rivaled that of vampires. At their head was a man Amara recognized, Jack Hawthorne, leader of the city's secret society of monster hunters. "Hawthorne," Amara said, her voice a mix of surprise and grudging respect. "I thought your kind had died out centuries ago." Jack grinned, a wolfsbane charm dangling from his neck. "We adapted. Turns out, in a world of smartphones and CCTV, hunting vampires isn't as lucrative as it used to be. But I bet these alien bastards will give us a run for our money." For a moment, ancient enemies regarded each other. Then, as another explosion rocked the city, Amara extended her hand. "Truce." Jack clasped her hand firmly. "Truce. Let's send these cosmic squids back to whatever hell they came from." As vampires, humans, and hunters prepared for battle, high above the city, Zarthak watched the unfolding chaos with his multifaceted eyes. The invasion was proceeding as planned, but these new developments, the pale, fast creatures, and the humans who fought with unnatural skill, were unexpected. "Fascinating," Zarthak chittered to his subordinates. "This planet is full of surprises. Adjust the harvesting protocols. I want specimens of these new creatures for study." Back on the ground, Amara led her unlikely army through the burning streets of New Aurora. Vampires blurred between buildings, ambushing alien patrols. Hunter teams, armed with a mix of ancient weapons and modern firearms, provided cover fire. Regular humans, guided by police and emergency responders, worked to evacuate civilians and set up barricades. As dawn approached, casting an eerie light through the smoke-filled sky, Amara allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The aliens had expected to find a helpless, primitive world ripe for conquest. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and powerful, and united two species that had been at odds for millennia. The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity, with its newfound supernatural allies, did not intend to go quietly into the night. Unlikely alliances form. The impromptu war room was a stark illustration of how quickly the world had changed. In the basement of New Aurora's City Hall, vampires stood shoulder to shoulder with humans and hunters, all focused on the hastily assembled maps and diagrams spread across a large table. Amara Nightshade, her usual elegant attire now smudged with alien blood and debris, stood at the head of the table. Beside her was Jack Hawthorne, the hunter leader, his weathered face set in grim determination. Mayor Elena Rodriguez, who had quickly risen to the challenge of leading her city through an alien invasion, completed the unlikely triumvirate. The Zarkan have established 5 major harvesting centers throughout the city, Amara explained, pointing to red circles on the map. They're using them to process and transport humans off-world. Jack leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Any idea what they're doing with the people they take?" A young vampire named Zara, who had proven herself an adept scout, spoke up. "From what we've observed, they're draining humans of some kind of energy." "It's not blood," she added, glancing at her fellow vampires. "It's something else. Life force, maybe." Mayor Rodriguez shuddered. "So they're not just invading, they're feeding on us." "In a manner of speaking," Amara confirmed, "which means every human they capture not only strengthens them but weakens our potential fighting force." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. It was Jack who finally broke the tension. "Well, then we better start hitting those harvesting centers. Hard." As they began to strategize, a commotion outside the war room caught everyone's attention. Lysander burst in, supporting a badly wounded vampire. "Elder," he gasped, "we have a problem." The injured vampire was Octavian, the eldest member of the Vampire High Council. His usually immaculate suit was in tatters, and a strange, glowing substance oozed from a wound in his chest. Octavian. Amara rushed to his side. What happened? The ancient vampire's eyes were unfocused, his voice weak. The Zarkan. They found the High Council chambers. They have weapons that can harm us. Lilith. The twins. All gone. As Octavian slipped into unconsciousness, the room erupted into chaos. Vampires who had thought themselves invulnerable were suddenly faced with their own mortality. Humans and hunters exchanged worried glances, realizing that their supernatural allies weren't as unbeatable as they'd hoped. Amara's voice cut through the panic. Enough. This changes nothing. We knew this fight wouldn't be easy. But now, more than ever, we must stand united. Jack stepped forward, addressing the vampires directly. Look, I've spent my whole life learning how to kill your kind, but right now, you're the best chance humanity has. Whatever these alien bastards are using, we'll figure out a way to counter it. Mayor Rodriguez nodded in agreement. We've already seen what we can accomplish when we work together. The evacuation of the harbor district wouldn't have been possible without vampire speed and strength. As the initial shock wore off, the group refocused on their planning. Zara, who had been quietly examining Octavian's wound, spoke up. The energy they're using, it's similar to sunlight, but more concentrated. That's why it affects us so severely. A spark of idea flashed in Jack's eyes. Sunlight, huh? I think I know someone who might be able to help with that. Hours later, the unlikely allies found themselves in a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building hummed with an otherworldly energy, and strange symbols were etched into the walls. A woman emerged from the shadows, her dark skin covered in glowing tattoos that pulsed with an inner light. Jack Hawthorne, she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. I never thought I'd see you working with vampires. Jack shrugged. Desperate times, Esmeralda. We need your help. Esmeralda, a powerful witch who had long remained neutral in the conflicts between humans, vampires, and hunters, listened intently as they explained the situation. Her eyes widened as she examined the strange energy weapon they had managed to salvage from a fallen Zarkan soldier. Fascinating, she murmured. They're harnessing pure life energy. No wonder it's so effective against vampires. She turned to Amara. Your kind exists in a state between life and death. This weapon pushes you firmly towards death. Amara nodded grimly. Can you help us counter it? Esmeralda's lips curved into a sly smile. Oh, I can do more than that. I can turn their own power against them. Over the next few days, as the battle for New Aurora raged on, an extraordinary collaboration took shape. Vampire blood, with its regenerative properties, was combined with hunter combat techniques and human ingenuity. All of this was woven together with Esmeralda's arcane knowledge. The result was a series of enchanted weapons and armor, capable of withstanding the Zarkan's life-draining technology. More importantly, they found a way to reverse engineer the alien weapons, creating devices that could disrupt the invaders' energy fields. As their new arsenal took shape, Amara couldn't help but marvel at how quickly old enmities had been set aside. Vampires who had once seen humans as mere cattle now fought and bled beside them. Hunters who had dedicated their lives to eradicating the supernatural now shared battle strategies with their former prey. One evening, as they prepared for a major offensive against one of the harvesting centers, Amara found Jack staring out a window at the battle-scarred city. Having second thoughts about working with the monsters, she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. Jack turned to her, his expression thoughtful. You know, my grandfather used to tell me stories about vampires. Said you were soulless demons, that the only good bloodsucker was a dead one. He paused, then chuckled softly. Never thought I'd see the day when I'd be glad those stories weren't entirely true. Amara raised an eyebrow. Only not entirely true. Well, Jack grinned. You are still a pain in the ass. Their laughter, brief but genuine, was a moment of lightness in the darkness that had engulfed their world. The moment was interrupted by Mayor Rodriguez, who rushed in with urgent news. "We've intercepted an alien transmission," she said breathlessly. "They're calling for reinforcements, a whole armada, heading for Earth." The implications were clear. Their recent victories, while significant, had only been against the Zarkan's advance force. The real invasion was yet to come. Amara's mind raced. They had made progress, formed alliances she would have thought impossible mere weeks ago. But would it be enough to face an entire alien armada? As if reading her thoughts, Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, we've already done the impossible. What's one more miracle between friends?" Amara nodded, her resolve strengthening. She turned to address the assembled group of vampires, humans, hunters, and now, witches. "We've all seen what we can accomplish when we work together. Now we need to take that unity to a global scale." She pointed to the map, where markers showed alien activity spreading beyond New Aurora. "It's time to reach out to every vampire clan, every hunter lodge, every human government. We need to pool our resources, share our knowledge." Mayor Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "I'll contact the federal government, get them to take our alliance seriously. And I'll reach out to hunter networks worldwide." Jack added, "There are more of us than you might think." Esmeralda, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The covens will stand with you. It's time we stopped hiding in the shadows as well." As the group dispersed to carry out their tasks, Amara felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, perhaps even impossible, but they had already achieved so much in so little time. Looking out over the city she had called home for centuries, Amara allowed herself a small smile. The world had changed, old orders had crumbled. But from the chaos, something new and powerful had emerged. The Zarkan had come expecting to find a divided, vulnerable planet. Instead, they had unwittingly forged an alliance that spanned the natural and supernatural worlds, an alliance that now stood as humanity's last, best hope for survival. As the sun set on another day of battle, Amara Nightshade, vampire elder turned unlikely savior of humanity, prepared to lead her people into the greatest fight of their immortal lives. The true test was yet to come, but for the first time since the invasion began, the future didn't seem quite so dark. The battle for Earth begins. The world had changed almost beyond recognition in the weeks since the Zarkan invasion began. Cities across the globe lay in various states of ruin, their night skies perpetually lit by the ominous glow of alien ships. Yet, amidst the chaos and destruction, humanity had found new strength in unexpected allies. In what was once New Aurora's financial district, now a hastily assembled command center for Earth's resistance, Amara Nightshade stood before a diverse group of leaders. Vampire elders from across the globe stood shoulder to shoulder with human military generals, hunter squad leaders, and representatives from witch covens worldwide. "The Zarkan Armada will reach Earth in less than 48 hours, Amara announced, her voice carrying across the tense room. "Thanks to our combined efforts, we've managed to push back their initial forces, but this," she gestured to a holographic display showing the approaching fleet, "this is the real invasion." General Laura Chen, a decorated military strategist, stepped forward. "Our orbital defenses are ready. Every nation has contributed what they can. Satellites, missiles, even experimental energy weapons. But against a fleet that size," she shook her head grimly. "That's where we come in," Jack Hawthorne interjected. The hunter leader had spent the past weeks coordinating with supernatural groups worldwide, forming an unprecedented network of resistance. "Our teams are in place at key locations across the globe. We may not have spaceships, but we got a few tricks up our sleeves that those cosmic squids won't see coming." Esmeralda, now representing a global consortium of witch covens, nodded in agreement. "The ley lines have been prepared. When the time comes, we'll channel enough magical energy to give those aliens one hell of a welcome party." As the various factions continued to discuss strategy, Amara found herself marveling at the scene before her. Centuries of secrecy and mistrust have been swept away in a matter of weeks, replaced by a unity born of desperation and shared purpose. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command center. A young vampire burst into the room, his eyes wide with panic. "They're here. The Armada. It's arrived ahead of schedule." The room erupted into controlled chaos as leaders rushed to their stations. Amara turned to the assembled group, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is it. Everything we've prepared for. Remember, we're not just fighting for our individual races or nations anymore. We're fighting for Earth. For all of us." As if to punctuate her words, the ground shook violently. Outside, the sky lit up with streaks of fire as the first wave of Zarkin ships entered the atmosphere, engaging with Earth's orbital defenses. Amara turned to Jack and Esmeralda. "It's time. Let's show these aliens what happens when they mess with our planet." Across the globe, a coordinated resistance sprang into action. In the skies above major cities, air forces engaged in desperate dogfights with Zarkin fighters. But they weren't alone. Vampires, gifted with supernatural speed and strength, leaped from building to building, bringing down alien craft with enchanted weapons. In London, a coven of witches stood in a circle around Stonehenge, channeling ancient energies to create a massive force field that repelled Zarkin landing craft. In Tokyo, a joint team of hunters and tech experts used reverse-engineered alien technology to hijack and crash enemy ships. But for every victory, there was a setback. The Zarkin's superior numbers and technology began to overwhelm even the most stalwart defenses. In Moscow, a vampire clan's last stand bought enough time for civilians to evacuate, but at the cost of their own existence. In Rio de Janeiro, a hunter squad successfully destroyed a Zarkin harvesting center, only to be vaporized by a retaliatory strike moments later. Back in New Aurora, Amara led a strike team consisting of vampires, hunters, and human special forces. Their target, a massive Zarkin command ship that had landed in the heart of the city. As they fought their way through waves of alien soldiers, Amara couldn't help but be impressed by the seamless coordination of her team. Vampires used their superior speed to create openings. Hunters exploited those openings with precision strikes, and human soldiers provided crucial tactical support. They finally breached the ship's outer defenses, fighting their way towards the central control room. But as they approached their goal, they encountered heavy resistance. Alien energy weapons filled the air with deadly light, forcing the team to take cover. "We're pinned down," Jack shouted over the din of battle. "We need to take out those heavy gunners." Amara nodded grimly. "Cover me," she said, before blurring into action. Moving faster than the human eye could follow, she weaved between energy blasts, closing the distance to the Zarkin gunners. Her enchanted blade, a masterpiece of vampire metallurgy and witch enchantments, sliced through alien armor like butter. But even Amara's supernatural speed wasn't enough to dodge every shot. A blast caught her in the shoulder, sending her spinning to the ground. The wound sizzled, resisting her vampiric healing. Jack was at her side in an instant, laying down cover fire. "Damn it, Nightshade, don't you dare die on me now. Who else is going to annoy me for the next century?" Despite the pain, Amara managed a smirk. "You should be so lucky to have me around that long, Hunter." Their banter was interrupted by a deafening explosion. The far wall of the chamber collapsed, revealing a massive armored figure. It was unlike any Zarkin they had encountered before, clearly a leader or elite warrior. The alien's multifaceted eyes surveyed the scene before focusing on Amara. When it spoke, its voice was a grating screech that somehow formed words. "So, you are the ones who dare resist. Fascinating. Your species shows potential. Perhaps we underestimated you." Amara struggled to her feet, Jack supporting her. "You did more than underestimate us," she snarled. "You united us. Human, vampire, hunter, witch. We may have had our differences, but we all call Earth home. And we don't take kindly to invaders." The Zarkin commander tilted its head, An almost curious gesture, unity, an interesting concept. Inefficient, but interesting. It changes nothing. Your world will fall, as all others have before it. We'll see about that, Jack growled, raising his weapon. What followed was a battle unlike any in Earth's history. Vampire speed and strength, hunter skill and weaponry, human determination and adaptability, all focused against a single formidable opponent. The Zarkan commander was a whirlwind of destructive force, its advanced armor shrugging off attacks that would have felled lesser foes. But slowly, surely, they began to wear it down. A precisely thrown hunter's blade shorted out its energy shield. A barrage of human gunfire staggered it long enough for Amara to get close, her enchanted blade finding weak points in its armor. Finally, with a coordinated assault that showcased the best of each species, they'd brought the alien commander down. As it lay dying, its strange eyes fixed on Amara. Perhaps we were wrong, it chittered. Your world may yet surprise us. With those enigmatic words, the light faded from its eyes. Amara and her team had only a moment to catch their breath before the ship's systems began to wail in alarm. It's set to self-destruct. One of the human soldiers shouted. We need to clear out now. As they raced through the ship's corridors, fighting off the remaining Zarkan forces, Amara's mind raced. They had achieved their objective, but at what cost? How many other battles were being fought across the globe at this very moment? Would their victory here be enough to turn the tide? They burst out of the ship just as it began to implode, the alien metal twisting and collapsing in on itself. As the dust settled, Amara looked out over the battlefield that had once been her city. The sky was filled with fire and smoke, the sounds of battle echoing from every direction. But there was something else, too. News was coming in from around the world. The destruction of the command ship had thrown the Zarkan forces into disarray. Similar strikes in other major cities were reporting success. The tide, ever so slightly, was beginning to turn. Amara turned to her team, vampire, hunter, and human alike, all battered, bloodied, but unbowed. This isn't over, she said, her voice filled with determination. But for the first time since this war began, we have hope. As dawn broke over the smoke-filled horizon, casting an eerie light over the battlefield, Earth's unlikely defenders prepared for the next phase of the war. The Zarkan had brought destruction to their world, but in doing so, they had forged an alliance stronger than any in human history. The battle for Earth had truly begun, and its defenders, human and supernatural alike, were ready to fight to the last. A new dawn for two species. The war against the Zarkan had raged for months, transforming Earth into a battlefield unlike any in human history. Cities lay in ruins, continents bore scars visible from space, and the night sky was perpetually lit by the fires of combat. Yet amidst the destruction, hope endured. In what was once the United Nations headquarters in New York, now a fortified command center for Earth's united defense, Amara Nightshade stood before a war council that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Vampire elders, human world leaders, hunter commanders, and witch coven representatives all gathered around a holographic display of the globe. The Zarkan have been pushed back on all major fronts, General Chen reported, her uniform bearing the scars of recent combat. Their harvesting operations have been reduced by 80%, and we've successfully reverse-engineered much of their technology. Jack Hawthorne, looking more grizzled than ever, nodded in agreement. Our strike teams have taken out 3 more of their orbital platforms. We're bleeding them dry. Despite the positive reports, Amara could sense the underlying tension in the room. But it's not enough, is it? She asked, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Esmeralda, the witch representative, shook her head grimly. Our seers have had visions. The Zarkan are preparing for something big. The final, desperate assault. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the command center. Screens lit up with urgent reports from around the globe. The Zarkan fleet, previously scattered and on the defensive, was regrouping. Thousands of ships were converging on a single point, the moon. By all the ancient ones, Amara breathed, watching as a massive structure began to take shape on the lunar surface. What are they building? Scientists and mystics alike pored over the data streaming in. It was Esmeralda who finally broke the tense silence. "It's a catalyst," she said, her voice filled with awe and horror. "They're trying to turn the moon into a giant energy collector. If they succeed, they could drain the life force from the entire planet in one go." Jack finished, his face pale. The room erupted into frantic discussion. Plans were proposed and discarded in rapid succession. How could they stop a threat of this magnitude? Their forces were stretched thin, their resources nearly depleted after months of constant warfare. Amara's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to take the fight to them. One final, all-or-nothing assault." Her proposal was met with skepticism. "Our ships can't match theirs in space combat," General Chen pointed out. "Then we don't fight them in ships," Amara countered. She turned to Esmeralda. "Your covens have been working on long-distance teleportation spells, haven't they?" Esmeralda's eyes widened as she grasped Amara's plan. "It's never been attempted on this scale, but yes, theoretically, we could transport a strike team directly to the lunar surface." The plan came together quickly. A joint team of vampires, hunters, and human special forces would be teleported to the moon. Their objective: destroy the Zarkin's catalyst device and take out their command structure. Meanwhile, Earth's remaining defenses would engage the alien fleet, keeping them distracted. As preparations were made, Amara found a quiet moment with Jack. The hunter looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. "You know this is probably a one-way trip, right?" Amara nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "I've lived for centuries, Jack. If my final act is saving this world we've all come to cherish, I can think of no better end." Jack clasped her shoulder, a gesture of respect between former enemies turned comrades. "Well, let's try to survive anyway. I'm just starting to tolerate you vampires." The hour of destiny arrived. In a circle of witches, Amara stood with her strike team. Vampires with enchanted weapons, hunters with advanced alien tech, and human soldiers with unbreakable determination. Earth's finest united. Esmeralda began the incantation, the air crackling with magical energy. "Good luck," she said, her eyes glowing with power. "And give those cosmic bastards hell." In a flash of blinding light, Amara and her team found themselves on the desolate lunar surface. Before them loomed the massive Zarkin structure, pulsing with ominous energy. And surrounding it, an army of alien soldiers. "Well," Jack quipped, readying his weapon, "they certainly rolled out the welcome mat." What followed was a battle that would be remembered for generations. Vampires moved in low gravity with impossible grace, their strength magnified in the moon's weak gravity. Hunters employed tactics that confused and decimated alien formations. Human ingenuity turned the harsh lunar environment into a weapon against the invaders. Slowly, against overwhelming odds, they fought their way to the heart of the Zarkin base. But the aliens, realizing the threat, began to power up their catalyst device. The moon trembled, and on Earth, millions watched in horror as cracks began to appear on the lunar surface. In the central chamber, Amara and her remaining team faced off against the Zarkin High Command. The alien leader, a towering figure crackling with harvested life energy, regarded them with what might have been respect. "You have fought well," it intoned, its voice resonating in their minds. "But it is futile. Your world's energy will feed our empire for millennia." Amara, bloodied but unbowed, stepped forward. "You came to our world seeing only a resource to be harvested, but you've united us in ways we never thought possible. Human, vampire, hunter, witch, we are Earth, and we are not yours to take." With a battle cry that echoed across the airless lunar surface, Earth's defenders launched their final assault. The battle was brutal, desperate, each side fighting with the knowledge that the fate of a world hung in the balance. In the end, It came down to a single moment. Amara, using every ounce of her vampiric speed and strength, managed to breach the alien leader's defenses. Her enchanted blade, forged in the fusion of science and magic, plunged into the catalyst's core. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Energy meant to harvest a planet's life force backfired, cascading through the Zarkan network. Across the solar system, alien ships began to malfunction and explode. On the moon, the structure began to collapse. "We need to go now," Jack shouted, grabbing Amara. But Amara knew the truth. The damage was too severe. The witch's teleportation link severed. She looked at Jack, centuries of life and wisdom in her eyes. "Go. I'll make sure this place is destroyed completely. Earth must be safe." For a moment, the hunter looked like he might argue. Then, understanding dawned in his eyes. He clasped Amara's hand one last time. "It's been an honor, Nightshade." As Jack and the survivors retreated, Amara turned to face the collapsing alien stronghold. With a final burst of vampiric strength, she plunged deeper into the structure, ensuring its complete destruction. On Earth, millions watched as the Zarkan structure on the moon imploded, taking a large chunk of the lunar surface with it. The alien fleet, without its commanders and power source, fell into disarray. The war, which had seemed unwinnable just hours before, was suddenly, improbably over. In the days that followed, as the world began the long process of rebuilding, the true impact of the war became clear. The lines between human and supernatural had been irrevocably blurred. Vampires, witches, and hunters worked openly alongside humans to restore cities and heal the planet. 1 year after the final battle, at a ceremony to commemorate Earth's unlikely victory, Jack Hawthorne stood before a diverse crowd of humans and supernatural beings. "We won this war not because of our differences, but because we learned to embrace them," he said, his voice carrying across the rebuilt plaza. Amara Nightshade, a vampire I once would have called enemy, gave her life not just for her kind, but for all of us. She embodied the unity that saved our world. As Jack unveiled a monument, a statue showing human, vampire, hunter, and witch standing together, he couldn't help but smile. The world had changed, old hatreds had been set aside, and a new era of cooperation had dawned. High above, the moon bore the scars of the final battle, a constant reminder of how close they had come to annihilation. But it was also a symbol of hope, of what could be achieved when all of Earth's children, mortal and immortal alike, stood as one. The Zarkan had come to harvest a world. Instead, they had inadvertently sown the seeds of a new civilization, one that reached for the stars not with conquest in mind, but with the combined strength and wisdom of all Earth's diverse inhabitants. As night fell and the stars came out, Jack thought he caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette against the moon. A trick of the light, perhaps, or maybe something more. He smiled, raising a silent toast to absent friends and the promise of a united future. The world had been broken, but in its rebuilding, it had become something greater than the sum of its parts. Human ingenuity, vampire resilience, hunter adaptability, and witch wisdom, all would be needed as Earth took its first steps into a larger universe, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together,